Welcome to ATTRA, Voices from the Field. This Sustainable Agriculture podcast is presented by the National Center for Appropriate Technologies ATTRA Sustainable Agriculture Program, with support from the USDA Rural Business Cooperative Service. Hi, I'm Heather Lingle with NCAT. Thank you for joining us. In this podcast, Margo Hale, Director of NCAT's Southeast Regional Office in Fayetteville, Arkansas, interviews Lauren Stine, a beginning farmer in Northwest Arkansas. Lauren shares how she went from being a lawyer in California to raising goats in Arkansas. She talks about the keys to her success, obstacles that she's faced, and the resources that have helped her. Lauren also explains the ways she's educating others about pasture-based livestock production. Let's listen.
Hi, I'm Margo Hale, NCAT's Southeast Regional Director, and today I am going to have a conversation with Lauren Stine, a beginning farmer here in Northwest Arkansas. Lauren has, I think, a lot of great experience and wisdom to share with our listeners, and she's got a unique story and some great perspectives, so we'll go ahead and get started. So thanks for joining me today, Lauren.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I wanted to take today to kind of focus this conversation on beginning farmer types of things. And so why don't you go and start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be a beginning farmer in Arkansas.
Yeah, it's a really odd story, and it all starts back in California in private practice as an attorney, which is not usually how most people's farming origin stories begin. But I was in private practice for about 4 years, and I enjoyed being an attorney, but I wasn't necessarily loving what I was doing, and I wanted to try and find a way to pivot my legal career into something that was more aligned with what I'm passionate about. And at the time, I developed a real curiosity about food production. Like a lot of consumers, I'm pretty average in that sense, that I just started wanting to learn more about where does our food come from, what should I be buying, how should I feed myself. And then around 2015 or 2016, the firm I was at did layoffs and let me go. And in hindsight, it was actually the best thing that's ever happened to me because it freed me up to go to the University of Arkansas and get an LLM degree in agricultural and food law and policy. It's a degree for attorneys who want to specialize in food law. I can't recommend it enough. I'm now a professor in the program, so I might be a little biased, but I think if you are an attorney who wants to dig into legal issues, in this space, you can't find a better curriculum or, a better network of other attorneys who both graduated or who teach in the program or participate in some way. So I moved from California to Arkansas sight unseen. And in the first month or so that I was here, the local food co-op hosted a farm tour. And the last stop on the tour was Ozark Pasture Beef. And during that tour, I met Ron Morrow. And, I don't come from a farming background. I don't have a single farmer in my family. I hadn't really spent much time on farms, and I thought to myself, it's awfully hypocritical to be advocating for certain farm policies or to be legislating or litigating in this area if I don't necessarily know what it's like to actually be a farmer. And so I asked Ron, and I said, would you mind if I come and just shadow you on some weekends or just sort of, lightly intern or just hang out and get a sense of what this is all about? And long story short, 5 years later, we joke that I'm still on the extended version of the farm tour. Through Ron Morrow and Ann Wells, and Ann Wells is the other partner at Ozark Pasture Beef that I met that day. And she's a large animal veterinarian by trade. Ron was the state grazing land specialist, has a PhD in genetics, taught at some universities. So it's really, as far as mentors go, you couldn't ask for a better duo. And at the time, I really didn't see where this path was going to lead. And it just got to be the routine where I'd go out to their farms, I'd help them with stuff. Ann would teach me all about animal health. Ron would teach me about rotational grazing. They'd both teach me everything that they know. And then the time came for me to finish the program and move back to California, and I really didn't want to. And I was surprised by that because the whole time the plan was for me to go back to California and go back to private practice. And through a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth and a lot of really awkward phone calls to family back home, I just decided to stay. And last year I ended up buying my first farm here in Arkansas. It's about a 40-acre farm in Prairie Grove. And I think the most instrumental piece of my journey to becoming a beginning farmer was meeting those mentors and essentially apprenticing for 3 years. Learning about livestock, handling meat and the sales side of the business and being able to ask so many questions I felt pretty confident 3 years in to just go ahead and buy my own farm. And I don't know that I would have reached that point had I not had that kind of mentorship.
Yeah. So when did it go from, okay, I enjoy spending time on the farm and I'm learning a whole lot, to, okay, I think I want to do this myself?
It's funny, and I blame my dad for making me watch Western movies growing up, but I've always wanted to end up with having cows. And I think if you're not born into farming, you feel like it's kind of a black box. If you're not born into a farming legacy family, or in a culture maybe in your town that has a lot of agriculture around it, it feels very impenetrable. Like, I can't just show up to a rural area, buy a farm. I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know how this works. And so I just assumed that having land and cattle would be something I do in retirement when I'm 60 or 70. Mm-hmm. And at the very best, it would just be lawn ornaments. Look out my window, see some cows out there. So I always had that kind of desire in me. And I think what really sort of expedited the road to, buying a farm, owning livestock, was really, again, Ann and Ron. When I started talking to Ann and saying, I don't really think I want to go home. And she was very candid and said, well, don't. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. There's an opportunity for you here. Like, you're very, very natural at this. You learn very quickly. And Ozark Pasture Beef is a partnership of 4 different farmers. And I know that Ann and Ron want to see Ozark Pasture Beef continue well into the future. And so myself and another beginning farmer, James Maginot of Beyond Organic Farms, have sort of started participating in the business with the idea that, we're going to keep this going for as long as humanly possible. And so I think as far as mentor-mentee pairing, it was really ideal in that sense. Because from what I understand and what I know, their kids aren't interested at this time anyway in coming back and running the farm. But, when you spend so much time building a farm business as they have, and you have such a huge customer base, you're selling to restaurants, you're well known in the community, you don't really want to see that just disappear. So I think we were both pretty excited about the idea of me just expediting my farm ownership dreams by about 3 decades.
Right. Well, you've talked about Ann and Ron, several times already, and I know that they are absolutely an integral part to your story. And, I too know Ann and Ron and have worked with them, and they are amazing teachers. And you did hit the jackpot when you stumbled upon their yep. farm and just invited yourself to stay. You were wise in that. But what would you say to someone else who is, looking to get started and, maybe trying to find that mentor, or, trying to figure out and how to learn from another farmer? What do you have any advice? I mean, it seems like things worked out just so perfectly for you, and I know that doesn't always happen, but just what are your thoughts or recommendations to other beginning farmers in regards to finding a mentor?
Yeah, there's a lot of serendipity to my story, and I wish I could tell people that this was like a well-orchestrated plan on how I intended to break into farming, but really all I've done is look back in hindsight and think, I almost didn't go on the farm tour. I woke up that morning and thought, I don't really want to go. I just moved. I got all this stuff to do. And one of my classmates was like, oh, it'll be fun. Just come with us. And I think about that a lot. What if I hadn't gone on that farm tour? And so I think what I would tell people is just immerse yourself in farming as much as you can. Farmers markets are probably a good place to start. Talk to the farmers, ask them, and be candid. Say, I'd really like to do this. I'm, looking for mentorship. And I think what you'll find, even with cranky old cattlemen, is that they really like talking about farming. And they were a beginning farmer at one point too. Even if they come from a farm family, they had to learn a lot of stuff for themselves. It's not something you're just born knowing how to do. So I think don't be shy. And if someone's sort of giving you the vibe that they're not really interested in helping your dream come to fruition, that's fine. But the good thing is that there's plenty of other farmers out there that might be a good match for you. So I'd also say go to farming events, go to farming conferences like Southern SOG, and just meet other farmers. There's lots of places on social media and online and through Instagram. As I'm sure you've seen, I share lots and lots of stuff about what it's like being a beginning farmer and just, my farm startup, putting fencing up, how I manage all the livestock, things like that. I share a lot, but I always tell people take what you find on social media with a grain of salt, because there's lots of Facebook groups where someone will post a beginner question, and then you oftentimes get 50 different comments and they argue with each other. And I think social media is great for connecting people in some ways, but I don't know that you want it to be your go-to resource for how to farm initially. But there are resources out there. There's university extension services, there's publications, there's workbooks, but I can't emphasize enough having an actual farmer to dialogue with. Like the fact that, and I ask Anne probably 2 questions a day. She'd probably say more like 20, and she'd probably be right. But I ask so many questions. I'll be out looking at my goats, and I'll observe something, and I'll just pull my phone out, and I'll text her and say, like, hey, why are they doing this? Or is this normal? Or, I'll send her a picture. Why does this look like this? Is this goat okay? What's going on? And I think a lot about if I didn't have that mentor resource, what would I do? And Google, I think, is usually everyone's default. Is, just go Google a problem. But even with Google, you get so many different responses. And then a lot of times whatever advice you're given depends on the species of animal, the time of year, your geographic location, there's so many variables. So just don't be shy is what I would tell people. And we always joke, we're in Arkansas now, but I'm a Californian at heart. And Ron always says, you California people just tend to invite yourselves over and not really listen. That's sort of true. And I think maybe some of my West Coast habits or, kind of personality makes me a little less reserved or shy about introducing myself, asking questions, and just being very honest. I love what you do. Can I come work for you? And if you want to work for someone, whether it's paid work or volunteered work, you have to put your money where your mouth is. If you tell someone, I want to come intern with you every Sunday for 4 hours, you better show up, because this farmer is making time in their schedule, and you can't treat it like a hobby. Like if you're going to commit to this, and they're also taking, because believe me, those 4 hours could be spent on a lot of other things. And a lot of times interns create more work than they actually provide. But you got to make sure that you're in it. Yeah, you got to make sure that you're going to show up and do the work. And that if you get to the point where you're like, I really don't like this, and a lot of people do. People start farming, and they very quickly realize, like, oh, I hate goats. Goats are the worst. Yeah. I don't want to raise them. Be honest with yourself about that, and say to that farmer, I really appreciate this experience. You've helped me realize that this is not for me, and they'll be happy about that. They're certainly not going to want to force you to keep interning on a livestock species that you can't stand.
Yes, absolutely. I think as an educator, anytime I can save someone from, investing time and money into something that they don't really like or want to do, I mean, that's a win, So, and I think your honest intentions and your desire to really learn, I know that came across really strongly. And as you said, putting your money where your mouth was, and you were invested, and you stuck with it, and you gained a whole lot from that, those experiences. So that's really good information and advice. And for the podcast listeners, I'll make sure and link our ATTRA internship database to the information about this episode, so you can find some internship opportunities wherever you are. So you've mentioned, a lot of the good luck that you had in just being kind of in the right place at the right time, and how things kind of fell into place. But I know that it hasn't all been rainbows and butterflies. So what have been some of your biggest obstacles as a beginning farmer, or, as you decided to actually buy land, and how have you, overcome those obstacles and figured things out?
I think first, I'd be lying if I didn't say there was a lot of, internal turmoil when you decide to just completely deviate your life plan. And when you call your family and your friends and you say, hey, I'm not coming home, that's hard enough. But when you say, I'm not coming home because I want to be a farmer, and you have a law degree, people see you as an attorney, you're supposed to be in private practice where you could make a lot of money, what are you doing? You have to be pretty resilient in your choice, and you have to understand that it's going to be hard for some people in your life to maybe initially accept that. And, your social life might change a little bit because your hours and your time commitments are a little different. I can't tell you how many times I've had to call people last minute and say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to make it. I've got a farm situation. that I have to deal with, and not everybody understands that. So you kind of have to prepare yourself mentally that farming is not really a job. It's very much a vocation or a lifestyle, and that your life's going to change a little bit for the better, largely, I would say. I don't think I could ever live in a city again or not have livestock again, but you just have to be prepared that, if you're not a farmer or not coming from a farm family, you're going to get a lot of different reactions from people. And, if all your loved ones say, that's great, we can't wait to buy our first CSA share from you, that's really great, that's lucky. But just don't let people who are confused by your decision deter you from what it is that you want to do, would be the first thing I'd say. And then time management. I think most beginning farmers have an off-farm job, or, you have to subsidize your farm startup. And that can get pretty wild sometimes. I find that I've become a lot better at multitasking or just triaging my life. What do I absolutely have to take care of today? There's a term that some farmers use called flashlight farming, where sometimes you end up going at weird hours of the day to check animals or to do things. So you just got to realize that initially when you're trying to transition, and if your goal is to be a full-time farmer, this is going to be even more real for you, I think, because you're going to be trying to scale up your farming business, as quickly as you can. You just got to be prepared to not, and I tell people it's not about burning the candle at both ends. Sometimes you just throw the whole candle into the fire and hope for the best. And then the third big challenge is buying land. And I could do a whole probably spiel about how many farmers we've encountered or I've encountered that bought land that really isn't good for what they want to do. And my journey to buying this farm was about a year long. It took me a year to find this place. And not to sound like a broken record, but the reason I have what is honestly an ideal farm for me at this point in my farming career is because I had mentors to kind of put the blinders on me and keep me focused. Buying a farm is one of the most exciting things you can do. And your realtor, or you may go by yourself, you're going to look at these farm properties, and it's so easy to have love at first sight. And you're just so antsy to, get on your farm, to have something that's yours, to start working, that I think we tend to see land through rose-colored glasses, especially as newbies, where we just say, don't worry about that floodplain, I'll figure it out. But those are really serious issues that you need to take into consideration. And I looked at so many different farms, and Ann and Ron and a few other farmers really gave me this super cohesive list. It's ultimately what I came away with of questions you need to ask yourself when you're shopping for farm property. And I wrote an article for Successful Farming about it. I can send you a link of my whole list and my whole process of how I would evaluate farm properties. You need to look, does it have fencing? I raise goats, and fencing is probably one of the most expensive infrastructure aspects of buying this farm, because it was just barbed wire. And I know you've got goats too, and barbed wire is not fencing.
Right, no.
They'll go right through it. And I wanted like 80 acres. And what I eventually bought was about 32 acres, and I can graze some of my neighbor's acreage. But what I had to finally reconcile is how far outside of town I wanted to be. And I still teach on campus. There's still certain city luxuries I like to have, like being able to get to the grocery store within 30 minutes, stuff like that. And what I realized is that 80 acres within 30 minutes of town was not quite something in my price range. And so I had to get a little bit more realistic expectations about what my starter farm was going to look like. But that's the beauty of a starter farm. It's just you're getting your foot in the real estate door. You're building equity. This is not going to be the last farm that you own.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, and we definitely will link that article, because you're right. I talk to farmers all the time who are like, I have this piece of property, and I can't access it. It's, I don't have an easement and it's landlocked. Okay, well, that's a problem. Or, there's no electricity and no water and no utilities close. Okay, once again, this is a problem. So thinking about those things ahead of time is very wise.
Yeah, and, on the whole no improvements, no water, no electricity, back when I was shopping for a farm, I was, like a pioneer woman back in the old days. It was like, I don't need electricity. Like, this land is perfect. And the farm I ended up buying had a house. And I cannot tell you the number of times in hindsight I've said to myself, thank God I bought something that already had a house. And, some people may have different preferences for living. They might be okay living in a mobile tiny house or building a barn with a loft in it. But I work from home largely, and so I think and I don't mean to sound soft, but there are certain creature comforts, after a long day of farming, like heat and air conditioning, that you really start to value. And so, I would tell people, you think you're okay with living in a trailer, for a few months, but realistically, the time it's going to take you to either build a house or build a tiny home is a lot longer than you think. So if you are buying just raw land, be prepared to live in that tiny home for maybe 2 years. Just understand that you might not get into a house as soon as you think.
Yeah, those are great things to think about. And, lots of things that people just don't even think about, like having to consider when trying to buy their farm. So that's great wisdom. And I'm glad that you found a place that, meets all your qualifications. And from, what it appears, it does appear pretty perfect for you and your livestock. So that's a bonus too.
Definitely.
So what are some of the things that have surprised you about being a beginning farmer? Things you didn't think of. I mean, just a few years ago, you didn't even think you would be a farmer right now. So probably the fact that you're farming, maybe that's the biggest surprise. But what have been some other things along the way that have surprised you about getting started?
One of the things, and this may not be an example that, you were contemplating when you drafted this question, but I find that I'm in a unique position because 5 years ago I was just a regular old consumer, and I will embarrassedly admit to you that I used to think only male cattle had horns, and all those really horrible cliches that if you're inside the industry you think, oh God, how are people so disconnected?
Right.
But over the last 4 years, I've been surprised at just how much consumers actually don't know about food production, whether that's small scale local food or conventional agriculture. It seems like I learn something new every single day about some aspect of food production, and that's really surprising to me. And in some ways it's fun because now largely what I do as a journalist is try and educate people, and I'm working on a new project called Sacred Cow with Diana Rogers, educating people about, with all this rhetoric we have around plant-based meat and should we get rid of livestock, what Sacred Cow is really about is trying to explain to people that there is a way to produce better meat. We can produce meat in this world that's good for the environment, good for people, stuff like that. And so the opportunity to take some of what my skills are as an attorney and as an educator, as a professor, and now apply that to something that I'm so deeply passionate about has been a really surprising career opportunity for me. And I think it helps me explain to people that if you want to get into farming or agriculture, you can do it in more ways than just buying your own farm. There's ways to get involved in the industry and learn about it other than just, owning livestock and trying to direct market meat. Other surprising aspects. I think the learning curve. I knew it was a steep learning curve, but man, that learning curve is just ruthless with some things. And I love working with experienced farmers like Ann and Ron because it doesn't happen often, but there are times when, there's a situation that happens that even stumps them a little bit or they don't immediately have an answer for. And in some ways that's kind of comforting because it kind of shows you that this is an industry or a vocation where you can't really learn everything. And then I think the people, just, like I said a couple minutes ago, when you become a farmer and you choose a very different lifestyle, I find that your social circle kind of shrinks a little bit. And I think about that a lot, and I'm not exactly sure why that happens. I don't know if maybe just because I'm so out of touch with pop culture now, I don't really things like going shopping or watching certain TV shows just don't appeal to me, and I don't know if I just have less in common with my peers or with other people, or if I really just only want to talk about farming, and I'm that annoying person who will try and start talking about goats or beef or lambing season or kidding season any chance I can get. So, but it's been surprising to me how many relationships now I have with farmers and just the connection there. And there's lots of talk about how we don't have a lot of female farmers or, farmers are aging out, but most of my farm mentors or most of the other farmers that I talk to are women. And that's been really able for me. And it's been really fun to just work with so many other women in the industry, especially Ann too. Yeah, no, she's great. Those are great answers. I didn't have anything in mind when I wrote that question, just because I know there's always surprising things.
But the first thing you mentioned was just the work that you've been able to do to educate other people. And actually, that was my next question, is I know besides farming and being a law professor and all the other things you're doing, that you do a lot of education to consumers and to others, and I know you do some writing and sharing on social media. So why don't you talk about that a little bit and let us know what you're doing and how you're educating others?
Yeah, what's been most fun for me, I'll selfishly pick my favorite first, is Instagram. And it is shocking to me that people I don't even know who they are and never met, they'll send me messages saying, like, your videos of your geese are the highlight of my day. To me, going out and letting my birds out in the morning is the most, I enjoy it. My ducks and my geese are just pets, really. They're just for my enjoyment. But, I love them. They don't provide me any income. And, in fact, they're kind of a drain on the farm. But,
yeah,
right. They get to stay here because I enjoy them so much. But just being able to communicate with consumers who are very much like I was, Instagram's been a great platform for that. And I just share the most random, mundane videos sometimes in the Instagram stories about, I just worked the goat herd, got them all set for breeding, or just when I go out and check livestock at night, I'll just post a quick video. And I get so many comments from people who say, like, that's so interesting. They'll ask me questions. They learn more about food production. And I've actually made a lot of really great connections with folks, even some vegans, believe it or not, who say, I obviously don't condone eating meat, but I really like to see the way you're raising animals, and I support this, and this is great. So that's been the most fun way to educate consumers. And what we're doing with Sacred Cow, we post a lot of that on Instagram, and we're starting to create infographics to help people understand certain aspects of meat production. And that spurred a lot of really interesting conversation and dialogue with a lot of consumers who just, most consumers don't even know what a cow-calf operation is or understand how feedlots work or what kind of rations cow are fed at a feedlot. So that's been really fun. And in the process, I always end up educating myself a lot more. And then through some of the outlets that I write for, like Successful Farming or Grocery Dive or Restaurant Dive, I'm reporting on very common issues in the food world, but it's really fun to kind of give the farmer spin to things. And I think most journalists today who are writing about plant-based meat or writing about livestock and the environment, they've never actually even been to a farm. And so a lot of what I read in other media articles, it starts to irk me a little bit. And that's how I know I'm becoming more and more of a farmer. It's because I read it and I say, that's not right, or that's not true, or this person is confused about this. So to the extent that in just my regular reporting, I can kind of infuse some farm-centered realism in my articles and my editors don't get too upset about it, that's been a real treat.
Wow, that's great. And we'll link some of those platforms and news articles and things that you have done so the listeners can get a little taste of some of the reporting you've done. And I know you've done a whole lot, so that's great.
Yeah.
I know that you have also are also going to be doing some sessions at the Southern SOG Conference in Little Rock coming up in January. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm excited for this one. James Magnot, the other partner and beginning farmer at Ozark Pasture Beef, and I are doing a short course, day-and-a-half-long short course. I think it's a day and a half, about pastured meat production and direct marketing. And there's going to be not a huge emphasis, but definitely some focus on goat meat. I'm seeing more and more people interested in raising goats. I get lots of messages about goats, and they're becoming more popular for a lot of reasons, some good, some bad. And so we're going to make sure that we cover a lot of goat production practices in this workshop. And the reason, I should clarify that I say some good reasons, some bad reasons, is I think people sort of underestimate what raising goats is like, and I'm sure you can appreciate this too with your goats. Yes. Is that they're not really that easy. And I get a lot of people who message me saying they want to buy a farm and start a goat dairy, and I try and politely say, well, why don't you just get a couple of sheep and see how that goes for maybe a year or two. That's not to say that you have to be a farm expert to raise goats, but I think they have the steepest and most unforgiving learning curve. And if you don't have a support group or a mentor or a veterinarian who's on the same page as you, it's going to be a costly learning curve maybe too. And so I see a lot of people with pet goats who keep goats as pets, or, goat yoga has really made goats more popular, but some people have trouble understanding that they're also a food animal. And so a lot of times if you raise meat goats, you have to combat some of the conception like, oh, how can you eat these goats? They're so cute. They're so fun and adorable. But I think if you raise goats, you say, yes, they're cute and adorable, but they're also absolute nightmares. So I just want to give people a
really cute nightmares, right?
Yeah. I mean, and I love my goats to death. I have the most fun with my goats. And people always ask me, which species do you like the best? And I don't have a favorite, but I think I like the challenge of the goats quite a bit, and how hard they make you work, and just how hard you have to think about certain things. And the fact that they are unique. So, yeah, I just want to give people a realistic understanding of, like, okay, you want to raise goats, just buckle up, and here's some things you need to think about, be prepared for.
Well, I was excited to see that you'll be teaching a short course, and we'll link that as well. And for any listeners who can get to the Southern Sod Conference in January in Little Rock, Arkansas, you should do it. It's an amazing conference, and you'll get to meet lots of farmers and hear from farmers and educators, and it's always a real good time. So we'll make sure and link that information as well.
I was going to say it's pretty comprehensive too. I think we're going to cover direct marketing, working with a butcher, how to find a butcher, how to build a social media marketing campaign. So it's not just me yelling at people not to get goats if they aren't ready for it. It's going to be a lot of really comprehensive information. So if you are a beginner, I think or even intermediate, if you've been raising livestock and you want to start direct marketing, it'd still be useful for you too. So it's going to be a really comprehensive curriculum.
Yeah, that's great. And those topics that you mentioned are so important, working and finding a butcher and the social media marketing, which reminds me, Lauren has worked with us here at NCAT in the past too, and her and Luke Freeman recorded a series of social media marketing webinars a year or so ago, and so I'll make sure and link those as well. They talked about using social media to grow your farm business and using Facebook and Instagram as well. So we'll post those webinars. They're full of really great information, and then you can go follow Lauren's Instagram and get to see that in action. So that's really good information. Well, as we kind of wrap things up here, Lauren, it's been great visiting with you and hearing your story and all of the wisdom that you have to share. Just as we wrap things up, do you have any kind of final advice you would give to prospective and beginning farmers? I mean, you've had a lot of advice throughout this episode, but any parting words?
Yeah, I do, and it's something I've just popped into my head a few minutes ago that I want to mention, and it's something I struggle with. I find more and more as I get into my career as a farmer is you want to do it all right now. And I would like to farm full-time eventually, but, in the financial situation that I'm in and just where I'm at in my life and thinking about starting a family soon, it's not really ideal for me to just quit everything I do and try and farm full-time. So I know that's still a ways off for me, but that's where I'm headed. But even still, I get so frustrated sometimes that I don't have more land or I'm not farming more, or that, things haven't happened at the really impatient cadence that I think we really like to see things happen in our lives. And I think you just have to stop and remember that you have the rest of your life to farm, and that you need to – it's okay to take it slow. It's okay to start with a half acre of vegetables and work your way up from there, because I think it's easier to start small and be really confident in the direction that you want your farm career to go, in lieu of just diving headfirst into something and then realizing this isn't necessarily what I want and having to scale back or just, go in a different direction from there. So I fight it on a daily basis. The impatience about wanting more, doing more, being more involved as a farmer. But I think you just have to remind yourself that it'll come with time.
Yeah, that's great. And very wise. Yes, start small. That's what I always encourage people. Yes. Let's make small and less expensive mistakes first, because there will be mistakes and there will be losses. So let's try to minimize that before we get big.
Yeah, and Ann would kill me if I didn't say, and I think we see this quite a bit, is when you do start farming, and if you've worked with livestock for a few years, this may not apply to you as much, but so many farmers, especially in the livestock realm, run out as soon as they have a farm and buy 4 different species of livestock. And it's chaos. It's absolute chaos. And I know it's hard, and I'm kind of a bad example, because within the first 6 months I had like 5 different species. And Anna a few times would kind of side-eye me and say, like, okay, that's a lot. And I felt confident, of course, because she's my crutch, and anytime I have a problem, I know that, much to her dismay, I'm sure at some hours of the night, I can just call her and say, what do I do? And she's so kind. She's never really said, well, I told you, don't do this. And I really haven't had a lot of problems because I think I did work with cattle, sheep, and goat towards the end of my time apprenticing with them. So I felt like I had a pretty good baseline of what I was doing and what to expect. But it's okay to start with one species for 1 year, get that up and going, make sure you understand what you're doing. And you got to be clear with yourself on what's a hobby species, like my ducks and my geese, versus what's your income species. And it's very, very easy to spend lots of time on your hobby animals and not the time that you need to spend on your money-making animals. So just think carefully before you buy 5 different species of livestock, unless you have an Wells in your life.
Yeah. No, that is so very true, and yes, that's what I would encourage folks to do as well. Start small. Start with one species and just a few of those, and you know, and my goodness, these livestock, most of them, at least the sheep and goats, they reproduce pretty quickly. So your herd can grow, faster than you think it can. So.
I started with 7 goats about 3 or 4 years ago, and by this kidding season in April, I'll have close to 75.
Right.
It multiplies quick.
Very quickly. Very quickly. Well, Lauren, thanks so much for chatting with me today, and I think there's a lot of good things here for people to glean and learn from, and it's been really fun for me to watch your journey. I think I met you the first time early on when you were still following Ann and Ron around at their farm and see how things have progressed and now with your own farm. So it's been really fun, and you're a great educator and advocate for agriculture. So you're a great partner to have. And so thanks for talking with me today.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to ATTRA Voices from the Field. Depending on the platform you're listening on, if you can, be sure to rate us and leave a review or comment. For more information on this topic, you can contact Margo Hale directly at margoh@ncat.org. That's margoh@ncat.org. In the notes below, you'll find links to ATTRA resources and publications related to beginning farming. Please call ATTRA with any and all of your sustainable agriculture questions at 1-800-346-9140 or email us at askanag@ncat.org. That's ASKANAG@ncat.org. Our 24 specialists can help you with a vast array of topics, everything from farm planning to pest management, produce to livestock, and soils to aquaculture. You can get in touch with them and find our other extensive and free sustainable agriculture publications, webinars, videos, and other resources at ATTRA's website, www.attra.ncat.org. That's www.attra.ncat.org. NCAT and ATTRA are pleased to announce the upcoming Soil Health Innovations Conference to be held at Montana State University on March 30th and 31st of 2020. The 2020 Soil Health Innovations Conference will bring together producers, industry professionals, educators, and students who are at the cutting edge of soil health across the country, on-farm practices, soil biology, carbon markets, and public policy. Please join us for a far-reaching exploration of agriculture's sustainable future. For more information and to register, go to soilinnovations.ncat.org. We'll catch you next week, and until then, keep on farming.